All right, so on we go with our reading of How We Learn by Benedict Carey. And this is part 2 of chapter 1. Chapter 1 being the story maker. And a lot of it is about how the brain works physically, the physical apparatus of the brain. I went out and had a run. So I distracted myself a little bit, which apparently is good for learning, and got my blood flowing. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the second part of chapter 1. So the second part of chapter 1 is principally about the search for where memory resides in the brain. So for most of the 20th century, it was believed that memory was sort of like pulp. It was all over the brain. It wasn't in any specific part of the brain, that it was diffuse. That no single area in the brain, was essential for memory formation. And this was based on some studies of mice that were done. But in the 1950s, this theory began to break down because of the research of a psychologist named Brenda Milner, who studied a man named Henry Molaison. Henry Molaison suffered seizures and was unable to keep a job. And so he went to a doctor named Scoville, who decided, studied him and found out that the seizures were being produced in part of the brain that was the hippocampus. And because the hippocampus was implicated in the causing of these seizures, he decided to do brain surgery, which was commonly practiced at that time for various mental disorders such as schizophrenia or depression, and of course epilepsy in this case. And so he removed these lobes, the medial temporal lobes, on which the hippocampus resides, and it had interesting effects on Molaison's brain. And specifically, what the effect was that he was not able to form new memories. So every time he walked into a room, it was like he had, he had never been there before. The people in it he may have met many times, but he could not remember them. Kind of like in the movie 50 First Dates. So he wasn't able to form new memories. His brain could register new information. Like, for example, he was able to practice drawing a star, and every time he did it, it struck him as a new experience. But with practice, he became proficient at it. And then later on, when he was older, he was able to learn to use a walker. So he could learn physical skills, but he could not create conscious memories. And so, like soccer, gymnastics, or I would argue language, the way that we develop those skills happen without our having to think about them. So, for example, balance, steering, riding a bike refines itself and comes together without our having to track or study those skills. Anyway, so the part of the brain that was implicated in memory formation turns out to be the hippocampus, even though the place that once created those memories reside is actually in another area, which is the outer layer of our brain, called the neocortex. And on the neocortex, there are all kinds of different things for motor functions and visual processing and planning and decision making and auditory processing and language. And those things actually turn out to be many of the things that are very unique to us as human beings. And so all of us keep our memories, it appears, in the neocortex primarily, but not at any single part of it. So for example, some memories might be more auditory, or other memories might be visual, or something like that. And these memories seem to be filed away, but in this case, Mr. Carey calls that concept that we file away memories the way we would file something away in a computer to be the brain's grandest illusion. And in fact, the truth is something quite different. All right, more to come.